Hi everybody, welcome to episode 28 of the Teesside Business Podcast. Today we are joined by David.
Hello.
Thanks very much for coming down and speaking to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you have a publishing company.
I do, with my wife. Yes.
How is that? How is that having a business? I don't think that we've had. No, we have had. Sorry, a business on where it was husband and wife. Unique in challenges.
Well, surprisingly, no. It works fairly well. Kelly's like the brains of the business with her accountancy background, and just being organised. And with myself being an author as well, I get left to do the creative social media bits and pieces. So no, it works quite well. We have very few fallings out.
Awesome. So we'll start off by, if you want to give us kind of a brief overview of your career history that kind of like led to, I suppose, you being a writer and then taking the step into publishing.
Okay, I'll be as succinct as possible. I always loved writing myself, and as a child used to enter competitions, short story competitions and things. And then life, as it does, takes you in a direction, and I became a nurse, and I worked in the NHS for just under 20 years, until last April, actually. And during that time, when my first son was born, my eldest son, for some bizarre reason that I've never quite understood, I felt inspired to put down an idea that I'd had in my head. So I tootled off upstairs where we lived at the time and wrote down a few pages of this idea, just roughly. And I showed it to Jake's mum, my partner at the time. And if she'd have laughed, I probably wouldn't have ever pursued anything to do with books again. Yeah. Because, you hear people say, what do you want to be? I want to be an author. Yeah, okay, good luck with that. I want to be a musician. Okay, yeah, crack on. So I never really told anyone, but Vicky was really, really supportive. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to get a writing coach in Steve Alton. He wrote the book Meg, that was the film with Jason Statham last summer. Yeah. He was my writing coach.
Oh, the giant
shark.
Yeah.
Everyone loves giant sharks. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough that Steve Alton took me on as a client, as a writing coach. And I told him this idea, and he helped me hone it into what became my first book. And then a few books down the line, in this time I'd met Kelly, who my wife, and my initial publisher for my first book was selling her publishing company. And she asked if Kelly and I wanted to buy it. I was a bit reluctant at first because being a nurse, I knew nothing about publishing at all. And we realised early on it's far more complicated than you actually appreciate when you're sat on the other side of the desk. But Kelly said, you don't get opportunities like this offered to you, and you'll be a fool to turn it down and you'll kick yourself. So we said yes, and that was October 2016. Okay. And a few weeks ago, we met with a representative from the Department of Trade and Commerce about launching some titles abroad. So it's
phenomenal.
It's done okay. We're quite gobsmacked and humbled.
So how many titles are you on now that have been published?
Over 100. There's two imprints. The company's called Live It Ventures, and there's an imprint called Live It Publishing, which deals with self-help, mindfulness, neo-linguistic programming books, those kinds of things that have how to franchise your own business, that have a huge market, oddly in Mexico for some other reason. And then the other imprint is Britain's Next Bestseller, which is fiction, children's books, romance, biographies, more traditional fodder. So there's those two imprints. So there's over 100 titles in total.
Right. That's phenomenal. So starting obviously like being on one side of the desk, as you put it, of being a writer, what kind of challenges did you notice that you weren't quite prepared for as you become a publisher? Actually, before we go on to there, for anybody who doesn't know, what is a publisher and what do they do? Because obviously everybody knows that writers get a publisher or a publishing house and they need that to be an author or get a book published, but they don't. People might not be very clear on the process itself or what it does.
Outside of the author side, which is where you write your work, however you structure your story, you've got a manuscript. There's two routes. You can either try and find a literary agent, which is the more traditional route, and that is how your big named authors like John Grisham and Stephen King and J.K. Rowling, etc., a literary agent, if they like your story, they will try and find a publisher, which is usually one of the big 5 or 6 that exist, Hodder and Stoughton, Corgi, Penguin, etc. And then they will do a lot of the work for you. You've just written it, and that's pretty much it.
Okay.
A lot of publishing houses don't accept unsolicited manuscripts.
Okay.
So you either have a literary agent or they don't publish your book.
Right.
With the advent of Amazon, you can self-publish.
Yeah.
Which I know we might touch on later because it does tie into writing in general and books. But some people don't want the hassle.
Yeah.
Because if you self-publish, it's fantastic, and I've always been supportive of indie publishing, and I did it myself before we had the company. But you have to do all the work yourself.
Yeah.
We kind of sit in the middle. That you don't need a literary agent. You can send your manuscript directly to us, and we will review it. And there's no cost. We don't pay in advance, but we don't charge anything to publish the book, and we split any profits 50-50.
Yeah.
So it would never cost the author anything.
Yeah.
And if we'll split everything, whether it's audio books, etc., 50-50. And if some books don't always find their target audience, we never hold them to their contract, and we always kindly support them and send them back their books so they can try something different, because not every book that you get suits your idea of how to market a particular title.
Yeah.
And that's it. So when it comes to us, we take care of, as a publisher, you take care of copy editing, proofreading, typesetting, how it looks, cover design, the promotional side of it. So it involves all those aspects, which we do ourselves rather than have a large team of people to do.
Yeah. So obviously, I imagine it's one of those industries that has kind of gone through like big changes over the last say, 10 years or whatever. Obviously, you mentioned the A word, Amazon, which fair enough. I'm not very educated on the apart from like basic knowledge of how everything works, but I always got the impression that either authors would love Amazon because you can self-publish and it's way straight through to market.
Absolutely.
Or I can I didn't know if there was the other side of the coin where authors are like that. It's the devil, but because there's no barrier to entry. Like I could write a book now and publish it, but it doesn't mean that it's any good. I imagine if you go to a publishing house and get accepted, etc., then there is like that approval that you are a good writer.
No, that's right.
So,
that's right. It is. It's a bit of a mixture of everything that you've just mentioned. Actually, that, as I mentioned before, I think the fact that people can self-publish is fantastic, because literary agents only take a very small number of books that are submitted to them, and it's based on their particular taste. So the book might be fantastic, they just don't like it.
Right. Okay.
Stephen King got rejected 30 odd times for Carrie until he got accepted.
Yeah.
My first book got rejected 65 times, so I was always chuffed that I beat Stephen King.
Better write than Stephen King then. Like,
I don't know about that. I keep some of them pinned on my notice board just as a reminder. But so there is that. So there's a lot of Louise Ross, who's based in Northumbria, Mark Dawson, Adam Croft. There's lots of authors, Rachel Abbott, who've done fantastically well. They sold millions of copies of their books, and they purely self-publish it on Amazon. Yeah. So it's a fantastic platform to get your book out there. As you rightly mentioned, there's no parameter for quality.
Yeah, no barrier to entry kind of.
As long as it fits the certain formatting criteria, and it isn't anything offensive. Someone's not trying to publish a sequel to Mein Kampf or something like that.
Yeah.
Then you're right, it will be published.
Yeah.
So there is that, but the downside is that if a traditional publisher won't accept your book, then you end up in a little bit of a grey area, which is where Kelly and I like to think we sit. We're not the big six, and it's not self-published, but we sit in the middle where we give you as much creative control as we possibly can, and you don't have to go through the rigmarole of all the formalities to get your book out there, because writing a book, good, bad, or indifferent, I think is a massive achievement.
Oh yeah,
a massive achievement, and people should always be, so proud of themselves that have written a book. The next step is obviously trying to work out your best avenue to get it into the world.
Yeah. Which I imagine now is either with so many avenues to market, like with marketing, etc., and things like that, it's, again, there's tools out there for people who self-publish to be able to get it out there. But I imagine with the advent of being able to self-publish and things like that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the noise has increased, like the volume of books out there more. So how do you get through that kind of thing?
It's I can only speak personally, but I know from other people who've followed the same route. One of the authors I mentioned, when you write your book, you write. If I write in psychological thrillers, so there's tens of thousands of books on Amazon just in that category alone. Yeah. So to make your book stand out above everything else, and established authors like Chris Carter or Thomas Harris, etc., you either need to write something exceptional, or you need to write something that satisfies the I'm trying to think of the word, that satisfied readers' appeal for something that's in the same vein. Crime novels tend to often have a particular structure. Damaged protagonist who's got a history that comes across a crime from their past. I'm generalising.
They always generally smoke or a drinker, and trench coat in the rain kind of thing.
That's not to say that those stories aren't good, because there's some amazing stories written like that. But people like what they like.
Yeah.
And if something varies too much from that avenue, it can be hard to make it stand out. So it's there's people that offer marketing courses, and people can charge a lot on Facebook. You see adverts all the time. But one author, Mark Dawson, he started off as an author and wasn't very successful, and put together a course called the Self-Publishing Formula, which I'd recommend to any aspiring author. And we were fortunate enough that he allowed us to promote it on our website. And he used his mistakes to tell you how to best market your book, how to use Facebook, how to use Amazon ads, what to do, what not to do. He can't guarantee that you'll be a success, but he can point you in the right direction and take you step by step on how to get your book to stand out in that, as you said, noisy market. And the success rate is phenomenal.
That's amazing. One thing that I did want to talk to you about when it comes to Amazon, you briefly touched on there with Amazon ads. I know that Amazon runs off an algorithm, search terms, all that kind of stuff. For people who might not be aware of it at home, when you go on and maybe search for crime book or crime novel, how it presents results to you is based on different kinds of criteria that Amazon look for, etc. How much of it is like playing the game or trying? Obviously, we do marketing, so a big part of what we do is keeping an eye on things like Facebook and Instagram's algorithm, etc. So we've got the best chance to market our customers.
Of course.
I know that Amazon, is, with it being its own ecosystem, has a similar kind of thing. I don't know if that's something that you've got to kind of keep ahead of or look at, or it was something I was interested to talk to you about.
We learnt over time, because again, when we took over, we didn't realise how complicated publishing is. Because even if you self-publish, aside from having the cover a particular size and picking the size that your book's going to be, whether it's going to be 125 by 195 millimeters, etc. Amazon will do the rest, make it into a book form, whereas we have to typeset those manuscripts to make them acceptable for Amazon to accept. And just, it does tie in, but touching back on what you mentioned earlier, that when you're with Amazon, and some people don't like it and some people love them, and I know some authors who've left for various reasons, if you sign with them, then you can exclusively, your book is marketed by them. You can't go and market it independently elsewhere.
Oh, right, okay. That's a bit like golden handcuffs, maybe?
Well, it's one way. If you take advantage of a certain scheme that they offer called KDP, where your Kindle book can reach more readers, you've probably heard of it.
I have,
and you get paid so many pence per page that's read, etc. You can't market your book anywhere else, so it exclusively has to be with them. If you want to market your book elsewhere, you can't make it exclusive to Amazon, so you can self-publish on iTunes and Apple and all of those things. So there is that issue. You either belong to them or you don't. But I can't remember the question.
We were talking about Amazon's algorithm of playing the game, which kind of...
So you realise that you have... the best way to get your book to stand out is to tag it onto books of a similar kind that people are searching for, because you do get to put in keywords, and you can put in so many keywords that cover a wide range of things for a science fiction book, from science fiction to fantasy to space to stars to moon, all these words that you think might trigger it. But you often find the best successes if you've got a kid's book and you just put a keyword in that's, I don't know, Julia Donaldson. You might find that your book sells a lot, because when people type in the Gruffalo, your book comes up as, oh, you're interested in this, you might be interested in that.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
They don't make that obvious, though, how to know that that's how to get your book to start. It doesn't always work, obviously, but those are things you learn just by doing, and it's trial and error. And, of course, the adverts aren't free, so if it doesn't work, then you've invested money in something that hasn't taken off. So, again, a course like the one I mentioned by Mark Dawson, it allows you to start small, so you can work out how ads, which ones are successful, which ones aren't hitting the right audience, tweak them. So there's a lot. I don't understand the algorithm as such, but there's a lot more, I don't want to say maths, but certainly science behind how you promote a title. I suppose there's a lot to be like, when I start to think about from a marketing perspective, like just cover design and things like that. Like I imagine when writers start writing books, I imagine they might have an idea for a cover in their head, but when you actually like come down to it, it's if it's on a bookshelf, it's the only thing you've got to do catch people's attention. Same on Amazon, like it's So how do you go about kind of like structuring that? Is it a case of asking the author kind of what they want, or have you got a formula that you kind of, not a formula, but you know what I mean, like certain things that a good idea on a cover, etc.? We try and ask the author as much as possible. We send out a marketing pro forma where they can put down their thoughts on hashtags and messages, because nobody knows a book better than the person that wrote it. However many times I've read it, they've lived with these characters for however long they've been developing this story. So and we also ask them to, if they haven't come to us with a cover already, a cover design questionnaire where what kind of things have they got in mind, and then we'll outsource them, or have a go. Kelly's really creative, and see what we can come up with. But we try and keep their input as much as possible, because at the end of the day, we've realised that you're handling people's dreams. And I know it sounds a little bit pretentious, but having been on the other side where I've struggled to find a publisher, the feeling you get when someone takes an interest in your book is like amazing. And I've never wanted to lose that, and neither's Kelly. So we do everything we can to do the best we can for someone's book. The only thing we don't promise is we can't make them a millionaire. We don't promise that, but we're handling people's dreams, so we want them to be involved as much as possible. And the only time we'll offer suggestions is if it's logistically not possible. Because again, until we got into the business, you have ideas in your head, but you don't realise how difficult it is to implement them as such.
So how have you found, obviously, taking over the business and running it in Teesside and things like that? Like, obviously, when you think of publishing houses, you generally think, the big six, London, blah, 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 blah. So it's very cool to know that we have, I don't know if there are any other publishers here in Teesside. I do apologise if there is.
There's one in Billingham I know of called 6E. They published one of my books early on in my career. They're really good, but I'm not aware of any others.
So how have you found doing, business and things in the local area? Do you try and use, local supplies? I imagine for certain things like printing and all that kind of stuff, you've just got to try and use. I'm not sure how it would work, etc.
We actually get the books printed in Poland a lot of the time, because the publisher based in Poland came with the previous owner, and it works out more cost effective if you're doing a larger print run when you're getting hundreds of books. If you're not, then Amazon is fantastic with their print on demand books, because the quality is really good. I mean, I know a number of years ago it perhaps wasn't great, but it's improved, and you could get a traditionally published paperback and a print on demand book, and you couldn't really tell the difference. The quality of paper, if someone understands the intricacies of white paper that I'm not privy to, but so the quality is fantastic. So printing's not locally as such, but it's difficult, I think, because people don't know we exist. They're starting to know we exist now, but because we run it from an office at home, it's a lot about advertising it. Which again, the gentleman from the Department of Trade, he's helped us in how do you get a small business's name elevated, above the ceiling that exists. Local bookshops, etc., aren't that supportive. Oddly,
Really?
even for not just for us being a local publisher and offering suggestions for books, but publishers who are local in Teesside. Apart from one or two examples, it's really difficult. They're not.
I thought they would have been very supportive to kind of like, jump on it
So
and
did
support
I.
local
Even with
writers.
my own books, they just aren't. They aren't interested. The big bookstore in Middlesbrough, whose name I won't mention, not interested. It's really, really difficult because we're not. There's no guarantee we're going to make them a lot of money, and that's the sad thing. You realise.
Yeah.
Independent bookshops are usually great.
Yeah.
Because they're really supportive of authors, but when you get to bigger chains, it's really difficult unless you get a manager who is lovely, which you do on occasion. But if it's not going to make them a lot of money, I've literally been told that it's not financially, beneficial for us.
Yeah.
So unless you're a big named author, they're not going to touch you with a barge pole, which is really sad because there's so many good books that aren't published by the big six.
Yeah.
And that people are missing out on because not everyone uses Amazon. My mum hasn't got a computer. There's a certain demographic, granted small nowadays, that won't have a computer or won't use Amazon for shopping, etc. So,
like, speaking from a person, and like I don't get much time now, unfortunately, but I do love to read, and it's one of those things where like I'm absolutely a complete geek when it comes to technology and gadgets and that. I do love it.
I love stuff that does stuff.
Yeah. We were just really happy in the office today because we found out if you have a Spotify family plan, where you have several people that you pay for like 15 quid or something, you can get a free Google Mini Home. But even though we have Alexas
really
all over the house and the office and everything, we still get a free one. But I still love like books, like the hard copies of books. Like
absolutely.
No matter how many times, like my wife has got a Kindle that she's used when we go on holiday. Obviously not now because
they're great for going on holiday though, because you can take 10 books and
exactly, and there's no weight and all that. And obviously I've got like I read graphic. This is weird, but I'll read graphic novels or comics. Let's be honest, they are comics on my iPad.
But they're unsung literary pieces of genius graphic novels.
Well, there was a lot of stuff, isn't it, where they had like obviously they're having at one point they were like, we're going to go on a massive tangent here. I'm a massive comic book geek, absolutely. But where they were in real trouble and obviously started selling rights and made movies and then a big comeback. I heard recently that there was a big surge in after Unbreakable. Because they were talking about like the art of comic books and stuff a lot in there. That was like a massive thing.
I can see that.
Yeah. So it's good that they're gone.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually reading books, I still want a physical book.
Oh yeah, you can't beat holding a book.
Yeah.
And even my son, our eldest son, he's got into my habit of, which is there's a word for actually walking in a shop and
smelling books.
Smell it,
Yeah.
flick through it.
Well, it is that a tactile.
But yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't think they'll ever go out of fashion, but I appreciate Kindles are fantastic. I have one. Books have been around since, God, since people were able to creatively write anything down on parchment or slate. So I think they'll always be around forever.
Yeah.
It's just, it's peaks and troughs, personally. But of course, there's certain companies dominate the market in regards to electronic reading devices.
Well, obviously, from a selfish business standpoint, it's much better to do ebooks. Costs drop, I imagine, quite substantially. So, as a publisher, how do you go about getting physical books into bookshops? Like, I imagine, obviously, there is the whole like ebooks and like that thing which must play a massive part in the current marketplace.
Most sales are made on ebooks nowadays.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
They are. Well, as I mentioned, some big bookstores, of which there is very few nowadays. Borders used to be one of my favourites, but of course it closed, didn't it? But some big bookstores, if you have a manager who's really supportive and championing indie authors, new authors, then they will arrange a book signing for you or at an author event. We've got a few that are being arranged in other parts of the country at the minute for some of our authors. and then they'll keep some of the stock from those events and keep it on the shelves. It's always on a sale or return basis, so if they don't sell it, but that's the same for a lot of products, not just books. But outside of that, although they're available on all main our books are available on Gardner's and Bertram's, just like Hodder and Stoughton books will be available. They're all there for the same retailer that Waterstones will buy their books from, for example. You can find all our titles on there, but it's whether A, there's interest from people coming in to ask about it, and B, whether a particular store is willing to invest in, supporting or displaying your title.
Yeah.
Because you have to pay for shelf space in some places, which is why they were looking to take your book, because if it's not going to sell, it's and it's sad that you have to boil everything down to the most common denominator, but it always does come down to money.
It's unfortunately, it's a business.
Absolutely.
And everybody, I know there's a lot of people in it for the art, and I really respect writing as an art form. Rick behind the camera, obviously here, is like a published writer and stuff like that. And we've talked a couple of times what a process it is of writing. I don't think a lot of people realise how it can be not soul destroying, but very hard on yourself to write a book.
Yeah, it can be.
It's as an art form, but whether you like it or not, it is a money-driven thing. As a business, it's got to be. Otherwise, you're a starving artist, to coin the term.
No, absolutely. And it's quite heartbreaking when it comes to royalty time, which is twice a year in our case. I don't know what it is for other companies, but some books sell more than others. It doesn't matter how much you promoted them, and you try to promote everything equally. Newer titles and new releases get more attention than older titles. Nobody promotes Peter James's first novel anymore that was written 20 years ago. You don't see that on the side of a boss.
Yeah.
People will only buy that one because they buy his new one, like it, and think, oh, I might start from the beginning.
Yeah.
So sometimes if someone's only written one book, a few years down the line, they struggle to understand why it's not selling and why you're not promoting it. But you're not going to throw money behind a book if the author's not writing more books.
Yeah.
Like you said, that is the reality of it. But it's soul destroying when it comes to royalty period and we split everything equally, but someone's book hasn't sold a lot.
Yeah.
And you have to say, unfortunately, we haven't hit the threshold for royalties. And the thing we try and manage is people's expectations. And I fell foul of this when I was just an author. That a book sells for, $6.99. So you assume you're going to get half of $6.99.
No.
But you're not, because Amazon take their 40%.
Yeah.
And then you've got printing costs that are taken off, and they take off shipping. So from $6.99, you might end up with £1.20.
Yeah.
So you only get 60 pence.
Yeah.
And yes, you can make a fortune, because if you sell 5,000 copies at 60 pence, you've made a lot of money.
Yeah.
But when you send out these royalty reports, some people are, and I can appreciate it, really disheartened and angry that they've only made this much. So we learned early on to try and manage people's expectations. That Kelly sends out a marketing pro forma that shows exactly how much it'll cost to print, how much they'll get, so that there's no confusion about. Because at the end of the day, if you're splitting something 50-50, if the author doesn't make money, we don't make any money.
Yeah.
And we're happy with that. We're happy to invest in something and lose out, because we don't want to be seen as profiting off someone else's dream.
Yeah.
It's not as affluent as you necessarily think when you my book's going to get made into a film, and
I'm going to be J.K. Rowling overnight.
Yeah. And J.K. Rowling, it was only with the third book and the film at the same time that she became a household name. The first two books, nobody knew who J.K. Rowling was.
Yeah.
So we've all been there. We all hope to be J.K. Rowling.
But
we find it really distressing, and it's horrible having to send out these messages. And some people are understanding and say, I've had a good run and my book's 5 years old, and that's fine. And some people get really upset, and it's awful. It's an awful feeling.
Well, I imagine same as some people have, say it's their baby, their dream.
Yeah, absolutely.
To pour literally their first book, I imagine people pour themselves into it.
Absolutely.
And that might be a process over months, or in many cases, I imagine years or a lifetime, possibly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then, and they think it's the best book ever wrote.
And rightly so.
Of course.
But when I love the term. You may have heard. I've probably said it a million times on the podcast, but the market decides.
Yeah,
like
it does.
Like, no one cares about your opinion. The facts are the facts. Like, unfortunately, but when emotion comes into it, like, you want the world to care about it, and I can imagine that. But I'm saying that, but I think if I wrote a book and I sold like 100 copies, I think at first I would be blown away by that and be very happy that, oh my God, like 100 people are reading my book. But then I can understand the other side of it.
Yeah.
But I've only made £3.90 or whatever, you know. Like,
it's interesting you're saying about other people's views. When Kelly early on said to me that when my first book, Hellbound, was about to be released, because you have spent years with these characters, and I'd spent years with this serial killer in my head and his protagonist and all these characters, and through the writing process, Kelly used to say my mood used to change imperceptibly when I was writing Obadiah Stark's chapters as opposed to the good guys chapters. She said I'd become a little bit more grumpy and angry and
getting
moody
into that headspace as you're writing.
And the weird thing is, when you've got these voices in your head, it's difficult to get rid of them because they are your kids. They've lived.
Yeah.
You've got GCSEs and school and how they grew up and what they used to play. You've got this whole backstory in your head, even if it doesn't go on paper. But then when it's out in the world, Kelly said, it'll no longer be your opinion because people will imagine what they look like themselves. It's not how you see them, it's how they see them.
All of a sudden, your
it no longer belongs to you.
Yeah,
no longer. It belongs to them.
And I suppose that's one of the beautiful things about books when you think about it, that me and you can read the same book, but what it looks like in my head when I read it, it'll be very different from.
Absolutely.
You know, despite how much the author might describe, like, you know, in so much detail, but you still could end up with something that's completely different to somebody else.
And that is the magic of books. There's no one way to imagine it. I always think it's a bit sad, having fallen prey to it myself, when you've seen a film of something before you've read the book. I always remember I saw the film of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest before I read the book, and all I could see was Jack Nicholson. And I always wished I'd done it the other way around because I didn't have the chance to put my own take on it.
I read The Martian.
Andy Weir.
Phenomenal book. Really loved it. It was. I read quite fast, not like a speed reader, but like if I go away for 2 weeks, I'll need like 7 books or something. Like, and I did the thing of where I always do run out of books, and then, you know, there's the section in the hotel where everyone left books, and that's where I picked up The Martian, and I loved it. It was brilliant. It was so funny, and the science side of it appealed to the geek in me and all that kind of stuff. It was great. So when the movie was announced, it was coming out, I was really excited, and then I was so let down by it. But my wife had never read the book and loved the movie, so I couldn't. But it's the horrible thing, isn't it? We get it with like Game of Thrones and everything. Oh, it's not as good as the books, like. And then yes, it is, like, you know. But
I gave up on Game of Thrones, not because it's fantastic, but we missed a season or so, and we thought, it'd be too much hard work to get back into it. So just read the spoilers on Wikipedia.
It's a requirement of working here. So we've had 2 new starters recently. Laura, who's behind the counter, is basically because the new season's about to launch.
Have you been like looking back, getting like the box set, binge watching?
They're ordered too. Hannah next door's never seen it, and they're like, that you've either got the choice of going back and watching them all, or in a month's time when they bring out the next series, you're not going to have much of a conversation in the office for.
As corporate mandates go, that's quite a good one.
It is. We have got some very bizarre ones, don't we?
I can appreciate that.
So one of the things that we were talking about just before we started to sit down on the podcast, just very briefly, was audiobooks.
Yes.
Obviously, this podcast goes out in audio form. Voice and audio is only on the rise. Bit of a random stat, but 1 in 4 searches now on a mobile device are done via voice. So
I can believe it.
Alexa, find me, go.
I've got an Alexa at home.
So that kind of thing, and then listening, and podcasts as well.
Yep.
Are growing. Audiobooks, like Mike, who's next door, is like recently just started to do like audiobooks, and he's like, it's the best thing ever. And
David Tennant does a podcast now, doesn't he? It's David Tennant's podcast with. It's like a guest.
Well, it's on the rise, massively.
Absolutely.
Like, I watched a clip from. It was on YouTube of like the Joe Rogan show. I can't remember who was on it, but he was saying like, look, like this is TV now. You're like a channel or a show. Like this is like TV's done now. People are going to you know, be going down this kind of line. So I wanted to talk to you about like audiobooks. Like if you guys do them, I imagine the process of doing audiobooks, you need somebody literally. Is it the author who sits there and reads through the book? Like, is it edited? Like, when I started to go down the rabbit hole, it was.
It's first of all, I love audiobooks. Being a huge geek, self-professed geek, my T-shirt more or less screams geek. I listen to all the big Finnish Doctor Who. I'm a massive. I was obsessed with getting the first 100. I had to get them, and Paul McGann having his existence as the 8th Doctor in audio. I love all that stuff. But Kelly has a membership to Audible, which is obviously an offshoot of Amazon. And there's some fantastic titles in there. They did some Alien stories.
Oh, right, really?
As full audio dramas licensed by 20th Century Fox. It had all the sound effects and the music. Fantastic.
Because that's not a new thing, is it? When you think about before TV, radio.
Yeah, like the Archers and all of those shows.
Yeah, and movie with Keanu Reeves. People thought it was a real life alien invasion.
Oh,
I want to see The Day After Tomorrow, but that's not.
The Day the Earth Stood Still.
That's it.
And
That
there's obviously War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds. That's
done
what
by
I was
Orson Welles.
Yeah. These were big productions that did for radio, so it's not a new medium by any sense. It's kind of gone a bit full circle. So sorry, I cut you off there.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. You're right. It is. It's a massive. Is a massive part of the industry now. So we found there's two ways that we do it. When we first took over, I was quite passionate about meeting people, not just authors, but people we might be lucky enough to do business with face to face. Because I always think having worked in nursing, you accomplish a lot more when you're sat opposite people.
Yeah.
I have a radio show on Zetland FM myself, 5 days a week. I do like the drive time show. Again, having left the NHS, it was without a safety net of a job. You think, oh, what can I try my hand at? I've always wanted to do. I know. I'll see if I can get in the radio. And I was lucky enough to get a job doing it, and I love it. But it's one of those things where you were talking about recording. It's all non-verbal, isn't it? You know, I know there's visual with this, but a lot of things on audio are non-verbal. So I had to learn about, if Kelly says to me, "What's the traffic like, David?" It'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's a nightmare. You can't do that on the radio." So, well, Kelly, if you go down the trunk road, you'll find that there's been an accident at the top, and emergency services are on call, and you have to like exaggerate your voice, and you think you sound stupid talking to yourself.
It's that radio voice.
Yeah,
isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely,
radio.
But at the other end, it sounds perfectly normal.
Yeah.
So when it comes into audio books, I went and met somebody who works for Audible. And we've built up a lovely relationship and send her Christmas cards and presents every year. And we've met her a few times in London. And we send her our titles and she reviews them to see if they're interested in producing them. They don't produce them all because it depends on the size of the book. There's obviously cost implications, etc. But also there's also something called ACX that Amazon do that makes your book available on Audible because it is owned by Amazon. But it means that you can just put a title out.
Yeah.
And say, I'm looking for someone to narrate this book. It's set in Ireland, so anyone with an Irish accent who's female between the ages of 30 to 40, and can they do it in a comedic style, or can they do it in a sarcastic style, or whatever? And you just put a sample of the book, and people will audition.
Oh, right.
So you send them to the author, because again, although we wouldn't necessarily have to, we like to keep the author included as much as possible, unless it's physically impossible. There's a reason why they can't. And we send it to the author and say, these 4 people have given an audition for your book, Diane. Do you like any of them? And if they do, then you sign a digital contract and they produce your book, and you can either pay them hourly or do a 50-50 royalty split.
Okay.
And it won't cost you or the author anything, and someone will narrate your book, and then it goes out on Audible.
Yeah.
And then again, you just promote it using the same mechanisms as books, and it's out there as an audiobook, and the authors, we put all of our books now on ACX and send them to Audible, because one way or another you can get them made, and there's nothing better than hearing someone read your words back. When mine was first made into an audiobook, it was the most surreal, bizarre experience, someone reading your words.
Yeah.
It's humbling and fantastic and weird.
Yeah, I can imagine it is.
Really weird, but yeah, it's a massive part of the literary industry now, audiobooks, and I can only see it getting bigger really, because like you said, everyone's got Alexas or Google equivalents or whatever they are.
Listening to our commuting in the car,
Yeah,
you know, et cetera,
absolutely.
et cetera, et cetera.
And you know, long journeys, people who commute, there's nothing better than sticking on a book, and you know, you can concentrate on that while you're, you know, traveling wherever. And I mean, Kelly, going back to Alexis, Kelly got me one because she thought it would help me remember stuff. And she's like, you won't even use it to play music. And she gets really tetchy, like Alexa, not Kelly.
Yeah.
If you like don't respond, have you noticed?
Yeah.
With yours, like, and if you don't do something over a certain amount of time, she'll actually like get irate and like remind you. She's got a bit of an attitude.
You've got to show love.
You do, yeah. Morning, Alexa.
She'll actually respond.
Yeah, she does.
The maid that we had on yesterday is like Alexa mad as well, so it's one of the things.
I love her. I think she's great. She's great.
So when it comes to doing business in the local area, are there any companies you want to hear from? Do you want to hear from local writers? Do you want to do business with people like who can help? Is there anybody out there that you're looking for help with in certain areas? Like, basically, we're asking you, like, if you have the platform now for the business community who are listening, is there what can we do to help you?
All of the above. And to a certain extent, we another one of we have all these really, I think it's because we're nurses, we have all these really morally high beliefs that we view them as people's dreams. We split everything, and we also believe that you should always surround yourself with people who know more about something than you do.
I agree.
Because we don't profess to know everything. In fact, what we know is very small. So we're always looking for people to advise us and say, have you tried doing it this and that doesn't work, and that's fantastic. So we're always looking for authors, local or otherwise, if they've got a manuscript in a drawer or that they wrote years ago and forgotten about and it's gathering dust. We pay Google a certain fee that if you put in Teesside publishers, we come up at the top.
Yeah.
And again, we accept unsolicited manuscripts, so we're always eager for anyone just to send it to us, because we like to publish things that perhaps other people have turned down. We like to publish things that are a little bit out there, because that's where the best, most imaginative stories usually exist that don't fall into a particular trope or genre. So if anyone has a manuscript, please send it to us. But also, we are looking to not expand as a business as such, but to promote the business to get these books that people have worked so hard on to a wider audience, which is difficult because, again, Amazon do dominate the market, and there's one or two bookstores that obviously it can be hit and miss whether you get in there. So we're always interested to see, we would love anyone to see if they could help us get these books further afield. Obviously, speaking to the gentleman that we did from the government is one aspect, but that's quite difficult in itself. Obviously, finding someone in another country who's willing to take on a title is challenging. So anyone who might have any ideas or would be able to help us get some of these titles, to a wider audience or to a different country would always be more than appreciative to get some advice or assistance from that.
That's phenomenal.
Definitely.
Yeah. So if there's anybody listening, please contact them.
Please do.
Right. So for every guest that we have that comes on the podcast, we ask them the same 3 questions.
Okay.
You may have heard them, and you're skipping through the previous podcast. You may not have.
I heard one of them.
So the 3 questions are in order. What does success look like to you? I'll run through the 3 questions and then we'll come back around to them. We ask that because we've just seen. It's a brilliant question because there's just such a wide variety of answers to it, and every single person is different. The good thing that we like to show people is that it's not one thing. You're not a success when you've got the house or the car or whatever it may be. Like, we've had people who've said those things. We've had people who just, I want to spend more time with family. Other people said, well, I'm a success now. I've done what I've always dreamed of doing. Whatever it may be, it's good for hear people's original thoughts. The second one is, have you ever had a failure or what you perceived as a failure or a setback at the time that has later led to success or put you on the path to something good? And then the last one is something that you are incredibly obsessed with or unbelievably interested in at the moment. We've had everything from gadgets to books, TV shows, we've had the guy who came on who had a drone company. He was going to pick up a drone. Like after he'd spoken with us, so he was really excited about that. Just a bit.
My son got one. I kept crashing it. They're really hard to fly.
We've got one there, one of the small ones that we were basically going to. The idea was, I don't know if you know, but if a drone's over a certain size, you have to film and use it. You've got to go through a load of like legal rigmarole. But if it's under a certain size and weight, then it's classed as a toy. So we were going to try and strip out a GoPro to put it on that and then use it for indoor filming. But
really
after about the third attempt of me nearly killing Rick in the office next door, we decided to shelve it. Mike next door, if we used to come on now, would say he was completely obsessed by it. He's just bought one of those electric skateboards with like a big wheel in the middle that's electric, and he's obsessed with that at the moment. Like, cool. So it's always a good idea to hear what people are kind of like,
Absolutely.
their secret shame behind the door. So we'll start with success, and what does it look like to you, either personally or for the company or a bit of both?
Can I have a two-pronged answer?
Of course you can.
Like an A and B. For personally, it's been able to be with my family and work because we work from home, and having the upbringing that I did outside of my mum, who was amazing. I've always wanted to make certain that I was always there for my kids, and Kelly and I working together is fantastic. So that's my personal sign of success, that I can see my kids grow up and work successfully with Kelly. From a business side, it's success would look like someone talking about one of our authors' books on TV, or seeing someone reading one on the tube, or the train, or the bus, or mentioning it in passing, to know that that author has resonated with a certain number of people, and that we played a tiny part in it because the hard work was all theirs. I think that's success from a business perspective.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, have you ever had a setback or a failure, or what's perceived as a failure at the time, that has later led to either putting you on the path to success or turning into something great?
To do with this, or just
generally? In general, either.
Yeah. I left the NHS last year, but I raised concerns about bullying and was basically thrown under the bus.
All right, okay.
And after a long protracted period, I was encouraged to leave, because they would only give me my job back if I forgot about all the things that I'd found, and I said no. So basically my contract was terminated. On the back of that, I wrote a book about bullying and harassment in the NHS, not necessarily about me, but I'd shared my story on my blog that I've had since I became an author. And I was inundated with people sending me messages about not only the organisation I worked for, but others who'd experienced bullying in the NHS, as nurses, as porters, as consultants, healthcare assistants, you name it. And I was humbled by the fact that people were willing to share their stories with me, and they didn't necessarily know me. They just perhaps connected with something that I discussed. And I felt that with everyone sharing their stories with me, I had a duty to do something with them and raise the profile of something that everyone knows occurs. It's like the worst kept secret. Everyone knows it happens, but nobody does anything about it. So I wrote a book about it, and I anonymised their reflection, etc., and had their collaboration with the authors, and then I interspersed the reflection with what is bullying and why does it occur in the NHS. And I got a lot of support from the Ben Cohen Stand Up Foundation, who do loads of fantastic work around bullying. So they supported the book, and I was invited to conferences to talk about it. We publish it, and it's not my usual psychological thriller, but that I'm writing another book about how it affects patient care. So that was a failure. Probably one of the most devastating moments I've ever experienced in my life. To became a success in the sense that I've got an opportunity to help other people get their story out there, to raise the profile of something that's an insidious problem in one of our most beloved provisions that we have in society. So
absolutely, that's really cool.
That was a success that became a failure.
And last but by no means least, one thing that you are incredibly into or obsessed by?
Oh, I was going to say Lego because my wife got me into Lego, and then Kelly regrets it ever because there's just Lego everywhere. I'd have to say Batman. I'm obsessed ever since I was a kid. Films, comics.
Have you read the book How to Become Batman?
No.
We've got it next door. You'll have to have a look.
I'll have
for
to
you,
make a note of it.
Yeah,
I didn't know about that
It's
one.
like literally like the author done research on how you would become Batman. So the training that you would have to go
I'm a
through,
bit old
like
now,
everything.
to be fair,
Yeah,
but-
I think he worked out that somebody could actually do it, but you would be dead like in 2 years.
That's why he's one of the best, because he hasn't got any superpowers. He's just rich, spent a lot of time, but he's like a normal guy.
Well, that was the joke in the movie, wasn't it? What's
Yeah.
your superpower? I'm rich.
But I think it'd be Batman to the point that not only if I go into Forbidden Planet, they see me and go and get my standing orders for me.
Yeah.
But Kelly goes in now, and they're like, "Oh, hi, Mrs. McCaffrey. We're just going to get standing orders." Yeah, Batman. I'm obsessed. Absolutely.
I'm going to introduce you to Mike before he goes. He's a massive Batman fan.
would love
The
to meet him.
debates in the
Absolutely.
office go on for a long, long time.
I bet they do.
He just sits there and stands on his chair and screams the words prep time. But that's a massive tangent that we would go off that no one would care about who's listening. So if people are wanting to find your books, or they're an author who wants to approach you, or anybody who wants to see the titles that you do, or read any of the titles that you've discussed on the podcast, where are the best places for them to find you?
The internet site where you can submit your manuscript as well as see, the various services that we offer, etc., is www.bnbsbooks.co.uk. We're on Facebook and Twitter. It's BNBS Books on Twitter, and just BNBS on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us there, or you can give us a ring. And it's 01642 285 722, which a few authors have, and that's how we got the ball rolling.
Awesome. All those will be linked below for anybody who's interested. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for your time.
It's been awesome to chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem.
Great.
This has been the Teesside Business Podcast. The Teesside Business Podcast is promoted and produced by Person Martin. Thank you very much for listening.